Late Night Health continues. I'm Mark Allen. We're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to be talking to the authors of a new book. It's called The Lost Chronicles of Ara, the Mirkwood Codex. And my fun reading time is spent in science fiction, fantasy, and in a world of dragons and witches. I don't know why. I have been reading this stuff since the 3rd or 4th grade. And but there is a health connection to this, and we'll get to that in just a few minutes. I'll start by introducing Steve Hillard. He is graduated from Colorado State University, has a degree in philosophy, and actually went and became an attorney as well. And he's been a carpenter, a welder, and practicing litigation attorney. If I did anything other than the litigation, I would cut my fingers off. Going to Joel Eisenberg, there's an ethnic reason for that. Joel Eisenberg also joins us. He has always been interested in the behind the artistic creation, which is an ongoing theme of the Chronicles of Ara series. He penned the book How to Survive a Day Job in 2004. Gentlemen, welcome to Late Night Health.
Thank you, Mark.
And then we're going to start by congratulating you. You've actually sold the book as a miniseries, correct?
Yes, we did with Ovation TV, and that's in development now. We're waiting for a new script for anybody listening who is in the business or peripherally involved, and new draft, and we're hoping to shoot towards the end of the year.
Well, we have there are two of us here. This is the unashamed pitch. See, we would be great characters.
Mark
for
could
you.
be a gnome of some type.
I could be a gnome. Yeah, exactly. You know, that's it. Anyway, there's
Do
my.
either of you squirt water or no? Or spend time in a lot?
or I could.
Okay.
Anyway, let's talk about the book itself for just a moment. How did you guys get together, and how did you decide to write a fantasy book?
You want me to start?
Yeah, sure.
Go for it.
Okay, Mark. This is Steve. The way it started was actually, and it kind of goes to a theme that we'll maybe cover a little bit. But it started with my kids reading the Lord of the Rings series, and at the end of it, we all sat around and read it for a year out loud. And at the end of it, my oldest daughter kind of sagely said, "So where are the heroines?" Because most of J.R.R. Tolkien's characters are all male, and there are virtually no heroines in his actual books. And so it was a great question. I kind of stammered and said, well, he didn't describe the whole world of Middle-earth, and there are other worlds and there truly were heroines. And I wanted to really, support her question. So we began to make up a story that evolved into a character called Ara, who was sort of the greatest heroine of her time in a world sort of like Middle-earth. Her story was lost and untold. And that was the beginning of the book. I published it in 2011. It got a lot of controversy because the Tolkien estate didn't want anybody to feature Tolkien as a actual character in a book, and this was really the first time Tolkien had been treated as a character. And it got a lot of notoriety. I went to Los Angeles to pitch it at a big event called the Great American Pitch Fest. And lo and behold, at a table, sitting there was Joel and his wife, Lori. And I sat down, and, it's kind of like a giant speed dating thing. And I sat down, and we had a great conversation right off the bat. And from there, it evolved into a collaborative effort on this whole series of books that are kind of spin-outs of that original concept. And it's been a great relationship, and I think part of it is because we share a lot of the same values And I think we'll probably talk about some of those in a little bit.
Got it.
With the same underlying values. So, Joel, you may want to finish that story, but that's the first part.
Sure. And, I guess the second part is when Steve mentions that we share a lot of the same values, maybe some of the same interests. Mark, you had mentioned earlier that, in your leisure time, you tend to read science fiction, fantasy, things with dragons and so forth and
yes.
so on. When I was a kid, I've always valued the human imagination, I guess. I've always valued my own imagination because it got me out of some precarious predicaments, right? As a kid born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, I never used to play sports, but I used to spend a lot of time watching TV. Before I knew it, I was writing short stories about the $6 Million Man teaming with the crew of the Starship Enterprise to save the world from the Planet of the Apes.
I love it.
And and I started writing and writing some more, and it became my escape. And then years later, I became a special education teacher. And as a special education teacher, I taught some severe kids that had severe disabilities. They were alcoholics, drug addicts, gang kids, and so on. And invariably, I found out that when these kids were writing poetry, these tough kids were writing poetry of all things about their lives, number one, they were able to focus. They were able to settle down a little bit. And the truths that came out on the page was just outstanding. When Steve and I had met, we had kind of that instant kinship because Steve used to teach at Rikers Island. And
that's a prison. That's a prison for those who don't know. A big prison.
Exactly.
I think maximum security, isn't it? Yeah.
It's a pretty tough place, yes.
Yeah, so, with that and my background and then, his story with his daughter and Tolkien, when he pitched that to my wife and I'm like, wait a minute, J.R.R. Tolkien is in your book as a fictional character? After that, we started developing it as a feature, and it didn't go. And then they had the idea that, let's write this up as a series of books because there's a lot of stuff here we can do. We can explore the lives of authors throughout history, and just so much we can do with this story, this overarching story. And we started with a book called The Chronicles of Ara, and we sold it to television as an 8-hour miniseries, as you mentioned earlier, and hopefully the rest is history.
Yeah, right, including, Mark Allen is the gnome. I don't give up, gentlemen.
No, we actually have a couple cameo spots in the book.
Oh, okay, good. I could be a cameo,
we'll have
too.
To think about that.
Yeah, right,
yeah,
good deal. Well, when if you go to latenighthealth.com, you'll see what I look like, and you can...
Yeah,
all right.
But from here up...
And we'll never look at gnomes the same way again.
That is absolutely true. We are talking about the Lost Chronicles of Ara, and we're going to do a turn right now. We've been talking about the book a little bit. We've been talking about the creative process. You guys are involved in an Indian reservation that has the highest suicide rate, I believe, of teens in the nation. And you're working with the tribe to help reduce this number, if not stop it. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. Steve, I'll start that and then pick up. In a nutshell, I had met somebody by the name of Brian Uptgraft at a speaking engagement. And Brian runs a nonprofit called Blazing a Trail. Blazing a Trail is all about building art centers and studios and so on for kids who live in Indian reservations that have no artistic outlet, no way of expressing themselves creatively. So he had asked me if I'd be interested in speaking to a group of kids about exactly this. Steve and I, sort of a spin-off of the title of his first book, Mirkwood, formed Mirkwood Partners, in which we sort of wanted to do the same thing, so our visions were aligned. So from the 4th on Saturday to the 11th, I'm going to be going down to Pine Ridge. I'm going to be there for a week. I'm going to be speaking to the kids and the tribal elders about the possibility of having after-school programs that are artistically related, or having building art centers and so forth. These are kids. The community is incredibly, incredibly poor. There are a 90 number of families that live there without running water. And it's the highest, as you mentioned, the New York Times put out this article about a year ago that Pine Ridge has the highest percentage of teen suicides in the United States. So that correlated to me is, well, they also have no way to express themselves artistically. There's no release.
But what's
So what
really
can we
interesting, what's really interesting to me is the fact that there have been studies to show that using some kind of creative expression, such as writing, reduces the suicide rate.
We've heard the same thing. Steve, what do
Right.
you think?
Steve, are you there? Did you hear that?
Yes, I am. I'm sorry. Yes. My business career spent a lot of time working with tribes in Alaska and the lower 48, and the two things that I just saw time after time were obviously economics and jobs, but the other side is this sense of creativity and expression, and particularly for the kids. And so, to me, that is a big component of, increasing the betterment of folks on, on the reservations. And so
Gotcha.
I'm just
We're going to
jazzed
take a
about,
time out,
this
and
effort.
we're going to take a time out. When we come back, we're going to continue the conversation. Our guests, the authors of the Lost Chronicles of Ara, and how they're going to be helping kids on an Indian reservation and help to reduce suicide rate amongst those teens. All right, I'm Mark Allen. Don't go away. Late Night Health continues.